Hello and welcome to episode 44 of Let Them Eat Cake. My name is Jack. My co-hosts are John and Ace. Today we are talking to a private military contractor with experience in Ukraine, the jungles of Africa and South America, and many, many more environments. He gives us a rundown of how life as an operator is, stories from his time in foreign nations, and much more. But before that, let's get into some important headlines for everybody.
Major updates throughout the southward region in Asia. First, Indonesia. Indonesian elections have concluded with Prabowo Subianto claiming victory with 60% of the vote. Subianto is an ex-general who's been banned from the U.S. due to allegations of human rights violations. He served under Suharto, so you can kind of put two and two together there. His reputation as a hot-headed strongman is well known, but his campaign focused on a strategy of making him look like a gentle old man. International neutrality is expected to be maintained, with both American and Chinese investment being welcome. Concerns have been voiced about what could be the new Duterte of the region, or even bring back policy from the era of Suharto, including a higher inclination to use military to defend territorial claims threatened by China in the South China Sea, while also risking involvement with the West Papuan movement, where Indonesia's army has already been deployed. An update in Pakistan's elections. Two of Pakistan's major political parties have come to an agreement naming former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to lead the country in a coalition between the Pakistan People's Party, formerly Bhutto's party, and the Pakistan Muslims League, formerly basically taking Zia-ul-Haq's dictatorship, and they wanted to turn it into a democracy, or a democratic party, which is that league. Not to be confused with the Muslim League that founded the country behind an actual good politician. This comes 10 days after tense negotiations to come to a conclusion following a largely inconclusive general election. The candidates of Imran Khan's banned political party, the PTI, were first to run as independents. They also banned the use of symbols. I've explained this a few times, but in Pakistan, where there's multiple languages and you're not sure of literacy rates, they run on like literal clip art symbols. Like they're the most simple clip art symbols you could ever see. And so they use those symbols to be able to identify the party on the ballot. So they also banned the use of that symbol, which is a pretty big deal to ban the name and the symbol of the party. That party still won, but they didn't win enough to obtain a simple majority. So the two major parties who are political dynasties have basically come together in their coalition to overwrite, even though Imran Khan, the joke is like, how do you win an election from a jail cell? And I just keep telling people it's the same country as America. There's no different. Two dynasties competing. One guy comes in, so they have to send him to jail to get him out of there. I'm not a fan of Imran Khan, but one of the charges they have against him is they invalidated his marriage and basically called him a sodomite. You know, it's like, oh, these kids you have are invalid because we said your marriage is illegal for some reason. You know, they like annulled his marriage so that it was illegal to have sex in the past that he had.
That's insane.
That's one of the three charges they have him on. Isn't that wild?
That is actually crazy. I didn't know that.
That said, this is completely normal for Pakistan. A lot of, actually, in that region, in that hemisphere, it's not abnormal that the outgoing government goes to like some sort of detainment. Myanmar, for example, somebody was in detainment. Thailand's prime minister, they just let out, who was detained before. They just let him out a few days ago. So it's fairly common in the region. Sikh farmers have begun protesting.
Say the line.
What?
Say jumping the border to India. Come on.
Okay,
I put it there for a reason.
Okay, a hop, skip, step over the border. Jumping the border to India. Sikh farmers have once again started protesting in a continued effort to force the Prime Minister's government to guarantee securities for crops, either a minimum guarantee or state support ingrained in law. The Indian government already subsidizes the farmers in a tune of $24.7 billion to ensure 800 million Indians are getting free rice and wheat. These protests began after Modi's government removed the farm laws that were put in place in 2021. As I said, these were basically a continuation of these protests. On February 19th, Modi's government proposed a 5-year minimum support price for pulses, corn, and cotton, but fell short when the Indian Farmers Union rejected the deal. The union discussions came following a weeks-long protest demanding higher guaranteed prices for up to near 24 different crops, which saw the Indian state drop tear gas on protesters from drones. Some analysts have claimed that the government has completely sidestepped any and all demands put forward by the farmers, saying that they should address at a minimum the minimum supported prices for crops. In Africa, ongoing protests in the West African nation of Senegal over President Macky Sall's decision to delay elections. Elections were supposed to be held on February 25th. The delay is said to be the nation's worst crisis in decades. However, the Constitutional Council intervened on February 15th, resulting in a permitted protest on Saturday, February 17th, and a guarantee of holding elections, but no date has been set. The police were still present at the protest, as they were at previous protests, but this time with a big difference. There was no riot gear and no violence, which riddled the initial protests following the decision. For now, only time will tell how the Senegalese will deal with this democratic crisis within their nation. I believe there has been updates on this, by the way. So according to the council, he cannot stay in power beyond April 2nd.
That's the day they set.
And it says 15 of the 20 candidates were approved. So they have Iran does this too, where they approve the candidates who can run. It's honestly, it may not be democratic, but honestly, it is a pretty good policy for a lot of these countries, you know?
Yeah. Unless you get people deciding that aren't the best people to be deciding.
Obviously, yeah. Also, we've had this wrong logo this whole time. No, that's the thing. This is like, but when it's like a colonial power being run by France, you know, they want to make sure they keep those capitalists in power. So they're going to be like, you can't run. And finally, Haiti. The small Caribbean nation is on the brink of civil war, according to the Dominican Republic. So if you're bad at geography, they share the same island. Stating that in event of conflict kicking off, the Dominican Republic will have no choice but to protect its own self-interest if the international community doesn't intervene. As we previously reported, the United Nations Security Council has approved a Kenyan-led multinational security support mission to enter Haiti and restore stability. However, the entire operation has been delayed time after time because of challenges in Nairobi, logistical issues, or funding. We've gone over this in the past as well about what the specific challenges in government have been, primarily being that this should be a military operation and they're sending regular police, resulting in further destabilization of the nation, further spiraling into a state of potential civil conflict. Haiti hasn't had elections since 2016, and their president was assassinated in 2021, which the Dominican Republic says was the beginning of this spiral down and triggering the current crisis. Definitely one to watch.
Okay, leaving democracy, we're moving to Oklahoma. We are talking about the tragedy that is the story of Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary student who was viciously beaten on February 7th of this year in a bathroom at Owassa High School in Tulsa County, Oklahoma. The following day, Benedict succumbed to their injuries and died, according to the relatives and friends. They went on to say that Benedict was a happily outspoken person and expressed sadness when one of their teachers was removed from their position due to brigades by the owner of Libs of TikTok and notorious anti-trans stochastic terrorist Chaya Raychek, who targeted the teacher because they were an open ally to LGBT students within this specific school. The February 7 incident was reportedly over within 2 minutes, stopped by other students and the teacher that was allegedly supervising outside of the bathroom doors. The altercation involved at least 3 older female students, where at one point one of the girls was pretty much repeatedly beating their head across the floor, according to the mother of the best friend of Benedict. They then went on to ponder that the death could have been connected to some kind of traumatic brain injury. However, the Owassa Police Department has said that they're unsure whether Benedict's death was connected to the fight or some kind of medical issue. The school allegedly got all students checked by the on-site nurse and assessed, with one, likely Benedict, referred to an off-site medical professional, while determining an ambulance was unnecessary. The OPD turned up at the hospital around 3:30 local time on the same day after being called by Benedict's guardian. I believe it was their mother, according to the OPD. They were entirely unaware of the situation in the school, despite the resource officer allegedly also taking a report down themselves, but not relaying this information to the police, resulting in the OPD taking their own independent report from Benedict's parents at the hospital. They were then released and rushed back to hospital the next day, where they were pronounced dead. They were laid to rest on February 15th. It's unclear as of yet whether the attack was spurred on by the American social environment largely fostered by Chaya Raychek that is becoming rapidly conducive to the genocide, or simply an altercation resulting in the death of one of the parties involved. Conflicting reports claim that Benedict was unable to walk under their own power, while others claim all students were mobile and aware. Either way, what has happened here was easily preventable tragedy that didn't need to happen. So now for some context, the state superintendent, Ryan Walters, has been on record in video released by the Oklahoma Board of Education that explicitly states their intention to enact anti-LGBT legislation and guidelines within schools, refusing affirmations and making life as hard as possible for people simply trying to live their lives in peace. This has been signposted by Chaya Raychek, who earlier I labeled as a stochastic terrorist, and this is because she has been running this harassment campaign through her Twitter account, Libs of TikTok. But before I go on, I'm just going to give the definition of the word, because I'm not sure if people truly understand what this word means, and it's very important to get across what she's doing. So the definition is stochastic terrorism involves the use of mass media to provoke random acts of ideologically motivated violence that are statistically predictable but individually unpredictable. So just let that sort of stew there a little bit and truly understand what she's doing with this account. So the Owasso High School had previously been a target for Raychek, but not the only one. Often her stochastic attacks result in personal death threats, bomb threats on schools, libraries, and public places, with even lynching threats having come through too. Pretty much all of them tying back to posts made by the account, which she often also deletes because she knows what she's doing. She gets away with it through plausible deniability, despite many of her posts being linked directly to threats of varying severity. Many of these accounts also follow people like Ben Shapiro, the head of the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh, a self-described theocratic fascist who rails on trans people almost daily, Michael Knowles, who said, quote, "For the good of society, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely." An account called End Wokeness that is essentially just a reposter for Libs of TikTok, giving her even further reach, and many more accounts that are constantly pushing for unfounded hostilities towards trans people, and not just trans people, just people in the LGBT community that don't agree with them. Raychek is a real estate agent by trade who decided to start harassing trans people and use this account to do so. It was then spotlighted by people like Tim Pool, as previously mentioned, the Daily Wire, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and much more, gaining not only millions of followers ready to harass the LGBT community and their allies, but now a place on the Oklahoma State Department of Education's Library Advisory Media Committee, appointed by the state superintendent, Ryan Walters. There's that name again, where she can now personally have a hand in banning books and stopping education. Yeah, and we actually did an interview recently going over some of this and addressing her directly. This also follows the video that I mentioned earlier that was released about 7 months ago, where Mr. Ryan Walters states, and this is a quote, that we have been clear here that we are going to allow boys into boys' bathrooms and girls into girls' bathrooms, and there's dangerous consequences when common sense is vacated, and other bangers like what we've seen is an assault on the truth in our education system, and what we've seen is instead of telling kids that there's two genders, it's biology, we have injected radical gender theory into education, telling kids that they might be other genders. It's dangerous. It puts our girls in jeopardy and endangers their safety. He says this in a video, and then surprisingly, he comes out and makes a statement about Nex and their death, and says, "The safety and security of our students is my top priority, as well as the first responsibility of Oklahoma schools. I mourn the loss of our student in Owasso and pray for God's comfort for the family and the entire Owasso community." So I'm just pointing out here, this guy is not a friend. So he is the one who appointed her to this board. This is the same dude who says safety is a top priority while putting the person who created this environment in a position to wield actual control over their lives in a state she doesn't even live in, nor has children in schools there, nor a field that she has experience in. So the question stands, how many more LGBT kids have to get beaten to death before the issue is addressed? So far, the GOP seems grossly incompetent when it comes to reining in the fascists in their own party, or it's willful ignorance allowing it to continue because of politics. Either way, it's revolting, and regular people need to stand where the government is failing these groups.
Before our episode with the about the private military contract circuit, I just wanted to say that if you subscribed on Patreon, the episode has already been released early for you. And in the future, we're going to be releasing unedited standard cuts to the Patreon early, basically whenever those standard cuts are done. So it might be weeks in advance, but either way, the news is now separated from those episodes, so you can watch the episodes early and then catch just the news.
But we have a little bonus for everybody. We have our Ukrainian correspondent giving us a story about the most recent city to fall to the Russian invasion. Our correspondent is from Ukraine, from the east of Ukraine. He gives a short little rundown of what happened in Avdiivka. So please
Also,
enjoy.
our correspondence team works directly on the ground with people still in Ukraine.
Yes.
It's a combination of multiple people.
Yeah, this is just one of these parties that we have helping us, and we are very thankful for it. And you guys supporting us helps keep this going.
Subscribe to our Patreon. This will change in the future, but right now it's any money, $1, $10, whatever you want. You'll have access to all features.
Mm-hmm.
When we stream, your name will be at the bottom of the stream, and you'll get access to early episodes along with exclusive content that's already up there right now.
And more coming.
Join now.
Good time of the day, everyone. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. On the interwebs, I go by al-qeada. I'm al-qeada Hex on Twitter, which we still call Twitter in this household. I was born and raised in northeastern Ukraine, and today I'm here to talk to you about the Battle of Avdiivka. For those who don't know, Avdiivka is a suburb of Donetsk and is thus a town that has been on the front line for almost 10 years. Literally, as I'm recording this on February 19th of 2024, and on the 20th will be the 10th anniversary of the broader war between Ukraine and Russia. Thus, the town of Avdiivka has seen more war than some countries have seen in their entire history, and it will see plenty more for the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, an important change has occurred recently. For the first time since 2014, Avdiivka fell to Russian forces. Now, how did this happen exactly? A few months ago, after the culmination of the Ukrainian summer offensive, Russia began its winter offensive, with Avdiivka being among its most desired targets. The city's defenses were quite strong after 10 years of resistance, but eventually, after taking colossal casualties, Russia was able to slowly but surely force the Ukrainian forces to retreat. Of course, events like these are hardly simplistic in their nature, and there are multiple reasons for why things went down the way they did. The primary reason, however, that was highlighted both in the media and in my private conversations with soldiers that serve in that direction, were shortages of ammunition. Now, this issue itself is also multi-pronged. So, of course, Ukraine's own stocks of ammunition it had at the beginning of the war have long since run out. Really, there are very few countries on Earth that can endure 2 years of nonstop warfare without needing a sort of a top-up. So it has to rely on deliveries of ammunition from its allies in order to continue fighting. And unfortunately, as of late, the allies have been coming up short in terms of delivering the necessary amounts of ammunition. So, for instance, last year, the European Union promised Ukraine to deliver 1,000,000 155mm artillery shells by about March 2024. And what happened with that? They are on track to deliver just over half of that amount. So I think about 650,000. Why? Slow contracting, underestimating the complexity of the task, because once again, all of the European militaries are in rough shape. The same with their defense industrial factories and such, and the governments just don't know how to, what a significant task that is to procure such a large amount of ammunition. And they are either, in some cases unwilling, in some cases they just don't know how to think creatively on this front. Meanwhile, in the United States, the problem has a slightly different nature. There, additional aid to Ukraine is being blocked by the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, who have sort of been captured by isolationist moods as of late. Now, the reason I bring up all of this is because you, the viewer, likely have the capacity to influence the situation, even if only by the tiniest bit. If you want to save lives, I guarantee you that some extra ammunition would save lives, both of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. If you want to save money, then giving Ukraine what it needs to defend itself, and thus shortening the war and making Russia pay for what it has done, will save money. Just imagine what would have happened if all of the aid that Ukraine has gotten over the last 2 years was instead delivered in the first month. We might be done with this whole thing by now. And on the other end, imagine if aid is cut off completely and Russia wins. Sure, you might not need to worry about eating Ukraine anymore, but chances are you'll have to worry about the myriad other ways that Russia could escalate this conflict beyond Ukraine's territory. So, the point is, whatever country you're in, call your representatives, tell them to stop messing around, and support Ukraine towards a swift victory. Thank you for your attention.